everyone. It's so great to be back in Sedona. What a privilege it is to be in this idyllic place and to spend a few days centering ourselves on the values and the legacy of John McCain. I think we can all use a bit of that these days. This panel is called Stirring Up Change, something our namesake, Senator McCain, was known to do from time to time. It's truly an honor to be joined today by two trailblazing young women who are doing just that in some of the most challenging environments in the world. Their full bios are in your materials, but let me just introduce them briefly. Anaïse Kanimba is a global development expert, a human rights activist, and a survivor of the Rwandan genocide, and a founding member of the World Liberty Congress, about which you'll hear more in a moment. When her father, Paul Rusesabagina, the real-life hero of the movie Hotel Rwanda, was kidnapped and imprisoned in Rwanda for speaking out against the government, Anaïse and her family launched an international campaign to secure his freedom. Roya Mahboob is an Afghan tech entrepreneur and one of Afghanistan's first female CEOs. Roya is an audacious instigator. She founded a tech company, launched a nonprofit to power women's technological literacy, and spearheaded the Afghan girls' robotic team, known as the Afghan Dreamers, that is the subject of an inspiring new movie called Rule Breakers. You should all go watch it. So it's a privilege to have you both here with us today. You both come from places and regions that have been buffeted by war and extreme violence, and where the voices and expertise of women and young people are often pushed aside and repressed, or worse. Roya, I'd like to start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about your own history, how you got involved in the technology sector, the impact that had on your life?
Sure. First of all, hello everyone. It's absolutely a pleasure to be here today. I think my story started in, I always say this story, in 1996 when Taliban came to our neighborhood and came into our houses, and they collected all the books and TVs that we had. And there was an empty plot of the land in front of our house, and they put everything there and set them on the fire. From the window, I saw the freedom, the ideas, and the knowledge that they are all turned to the ash. And at that moment, I was little, but I just wished that I had the magic things, that I could disappear in the books before they can take it. I could disappear the TV that we're watching, our cartoons, before they can take it. So we had to leave Afghanistan at that time. We went to Iran and we migrated there, and I became as refugees, and I could go to the schools there. In 2003, when things changed in Afghanistan, we returned back to Afghanistan, and there was lots of opportunity exists for women at that time. And but still, the community of Herat was very conservative. And there was only one library there that you have to go there and take the books, and then if you don't find the books, you have to write the name of the books and waiting for someone to go to Iran or go to Pakistan to bring for you new books. And there was a TV that you only watch the news that your parents choose, the channel, that the only one narrative that you heard. And then I heard that there is in 2003, end of 2003, early 2004, there was an internet cafe that was opened up in Herat, and people talk about this magic box that connects you with the people outside of the world. And I was so curious to see this magic box, but only my brothers and my cousin could go there, and the good girl wouldn't walk in. And I was insisted to go there and see this, the box, and then which people call it computer. And that's how the first time that I saw the computer was in front of me, but I saw a world beyond the world that I always known. I saw that how the knowledge wasn't locked away, and how ideas traveled freely, and opportunity wasn't limited to the geography. And at that moment, I know that there is something's changing me, and I thought that this shouldn't be only for Western or for the men. It's for everybody who wants to learn and who wants to question and who wants to build a new life for themselves. And I made determined to make technology to be the center of my career. I went to the schools and I graduated from computer science, and then I started working at Georgetown University as IT coordinator. And later on, I started my business in tech. And I saw how technology shaped my life, my personal life, and also my professional life. But there is something in me that there are millions of the girls who are like me, that are curious but giving no vision to explore the world. And I wanted to give them the same opportunity that changed my life and giving it to them. And let them to change their lives. So we decided to build the IT centers inside of the public schools and teaching young girls at a young age of 12 to 18 to learn basic things, how to work with the computer, how to work with the social media, and then to the level that they can learn about coding, they can learn about robotics, they can learn about the blockchain and also cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. During that time, we also faced it with, when we trying to pay our women that they are working for us, we faced that many of these women, they didn't have a bank account. And we have to deposit the money in the account of the male relatives or giving the cash, which wasn't secure. And I'm talking about 2013. And then we heard about Bitcoin. And we implemented the Bitcoin. We are one of the early companies that implemented Bitcoin, and we decided to give them because many of the women didn't have bank account. And it's not only the Afghan women. I think that around more than 1 billion of the people who don't have a bank account, but the majority probably are women. And in Afghanistan at the time was 85% who didn't have bank account because they didn't trust the bank and the system and the central government. And later of that, we helped 13 technology centers to build it up, and we helped 24,000 of the girls come to our program to learn about the training. And in 2017, we introduced the robotics and First Global, which they're reaching out to me and asked me if I can have a team of teenagers that they can compete at the First Global competition. And I told them that, sorry, I told them that robotics is very new. I mean, like I'm always fascinated with technology and with coding, but I don't know if you can find the teenagers. They told me that either build the teams or find a team of teenagers. So we decided to build a team, all young girls, because we definitely want to send a message for the girls inside of Afghanistan, but also outside. And we take these young girls, and obviously they didn't get the visa at the beginning, and then with all of the challenges they faced, but finally they could come to the United States and they compete. But they're becoming as a symbol of hope and determination in Afghanistan. Once they return back, we saw that there is a light in the darkness in the conservative community that for centuries ignored women's ability in science and technology. Something has changed. And the community that they didn't want that the girls go to just learn about computer and internet, they shift their minds and they feel of sense of the pride that we see within the Afghan community. And we decided to keep continuing with robotics and bring those technologies back to Afghanistan and helping more girls to learn about that. And we went to many more stages. We win some of the competition, we lose some of the competition, but this girl is becoming, becoming a symbol of pride. And that was the reason we talked with the Afghan governments at this time that we have to prepare the younger generation for future jobs. And we got previous governments, we did a public-private partnership with them and to building the IT centers and the incubator for innovation centers for the robotics and AI. And we decided to do that. And then during the pandemic, interestingly, the government contacted my team to build, when there was a shortage of the ventilators, to build a ventilator for them. So I'm just trying to say that how things shifted from the time that I went, and it was very bad that I can go to computer and learn about internet, to the time that the young girls could go to compete in the world and in robotics and AI. And obviously after 12 months takeover, things shifted.
I just want to, you glossed over, you started a tech company just as though it was something that you did in an afternoon. And I just wondered if you could say a couple of words about maybe even when you were starting to learn about computers, was there any social barrier to that? How did your parents feel about it? And then, then starting a company, a tech company as a woman in Afghanistan, even during this more liberal period, did you have challenges?
Obviously, being a tech female CEO anywhere in part of the world will introduce you with some challenges and obstacles, but in Afghanistan it was double. It wasn't only that you don't have access to the finance, that technical teams and people don't take you serious as a tech engineers or as an entrepreneur, but also there are lots of the social barriers and social cultural barriers because they didn't see women as an engineer, and then especially in the tech, which was very male-dominated and was very new at the time in Afghanistan. We got a lot of threats. My teams get threats, and we got warning. People didn't pay us full for the services that we provided for them. And because of that, I decided to become a digital entrepreneur and not rely on the board of a country that they make a decision for us. That's why it was digital citizen. And I found my investor online. He was in New York. He never was in the region. and he decided to invest in my company in Afghanistan. And that's also we built in the platform called Women X, because I want that the women from the safe houses in their homes, they can still work, but they get paid. And that's why we brought also Bitcoin. So if the women cannot have, cannot go work outside because of the family not allow them, or the father or husband or brother don't see, they can still do coding at the, at the home, and they get paid. Yeah, I think that there was lots of the barriers, but technology is helping us to bypass the social and, that cultural barriers.
Amazing. Anaïse, let's hear from you. You are a survivor, literally and figuratively. Can you tell us a bit about your story and what led you to do the important work that you're doing now?
Well, also, it's an honor for me to be sitting here in front of all of you all and in this beautiful place, Sedona. It's my first time in Arizona, so I'm very excited to be here and to be speaking to you all. So my story begins, sadly, in the genocide in 1994, in the Rwandan genocide, when I lost my biological parents because they were Tutsi. My sister and I were orphaned. We were found in a refugee camp. We stayed there for about 6 weeks until our family relatives found us. And the people who found us were Paul Rusesabagina and my aunt Tatiana. They adopted us right away, and they raised us as their own children and gave us the love that any kid could ever dream of. Unfortunately, right after the war, there was a lot of killing, specifically against Hutu. My father, who I call my father today, Paul Rusesabagina, is Hutu. Tatiana is Tutsi. So in Rwanda, there's a lot of mix of Hutu and Tutsi, and it can get very confusing for people on the outside. But that's also the beauty of our country. And so, because many people many Hutu men who were leaders in the community were being persecuted, my family had to exile to Belgium. And in 2004, a movie called Hotel Rwanda was released, and there was a story of my father and his bravery during the genocide when he saved more than 1,200 people and managed to bring them from Kigali to the refugee camps, and they stay alive. When the movie came out, he received a lot of praise by the international community. He was welcomed in many platforms he ever dreamed of, and he realized that he should use this opportunity to teach to the international community what can happen when hate takes over a country, what can happen when people are disenfranchised politically, and when people lose any kind of hope. And this is what happened in our country in the 1994 genocide. He also wanted to use this platform to talk about the challenges our country was going through since 2004 until today. When the genocide ended, Paul Kagame with the FPR took over the country. He became officially president in 2000, but his rise to power came at the cost of human rights violation. At the cost of human rights, he pushed away all dissident opposition. He took out any kind of free media, and many people have had to exile since Kagame took power. Unfortunately, during this time, over the last 15 years, when the movie had come out, Rwanda kept on being welcomed around the world because there was this guilt by the international community that we were left alone, we were abandoned in those 100 days. Unfortunately, Paul Kagame took advantage of this guilt of the international community and decided to mount more influence. And in this time, many people were not realizing what was happening in our country. We're not realizing that across our border in the Congo, many people, millions, had died since 1996 because of Kagame rebels and people he was supporting to loot the countries and in the DRC. And so this dark side of our country was pushed aside despite my father trying to speak about it. And in 2004, by then my father had become one of the main critics of the Rwandan government. And in 2020, he was lured to Dubai and then kidnapped and then brought to Rwanda. And then he would disappear for 3 days. didn't know where he was. In those 3 days, he was being tortured, and we found out on August 31st, 2020, that my father was in Kigali. We thought we were never going to see him again, but thankfully, the international community paid attention. They used the media as a tool to show that he was there, and they accused him of terrorism. And so they welcomed so many people from across the world that now they were forced to demonstrate and to prove that my father was a terrorist. They mounted a case against him. He was not allowed to have lawyers. He was in solitary confinement for 11 months. But on the other side, we were in the United States, in Europe, and my family decided to stand up. Because something that we've learned is that when a person is a political prisoner, one way to save their life is to speak about them, to be their voices. And we wanted to be Dad's voice in anywhere we could go. And thankfully also, the United States stepped up. Ambassador Carson's led the US government in supporting our father, because my father is also a legal permanent resident. And one of the reasons why Kagame made an effort to bring him, such grand effort to bring him to Rwanda, is because he knew that the United States cared about my father. My father received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2004, 2005 by President George Bush. And this is something that was really important for my father, but also for people in our country, because they realized that people knew what happened in the genocide and they knew what were paying attention. And Kagame wanted to show to the rest of our country, but to people outside, that if he could get somebody who had received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in the United States, bring them back by Rwanda, then nobody can ever go above him. He wanted to give a lesson to anybody criticizing him. But we did not allow that to happen, because we miss our father, first of all. We love him so much, and I personally did not want to lose a second father. And in those 2.5 years, we met many wonderful people, many organizations like the Clooney Foundation, Human Rights Watch, Freedom House, and the Human Rights Foundation came up to us. Strangers that I did not know came to us and wanted to support us. And in those times of these dark days, as said for me, I also realized that there's so much more humanity than darkness. And without the support of people who had never met my father, without the people who believed in justice, my father would not be here today with us. He was freed in March 2023, and he's now back home with us. He's in Texas, and he's taking care of himself, and he's working on hopefully coming back to the public and speaking about his story. But in this moment, I also met many other people who were in similar situation as mine from different countries. They were from Venezuela, they're from Russia, and from Zimbabwe, in Lebanon as well too, and other places around the world. And we realized that a lot of these authoritarian leaders, and I would call many of them dictators, were using the same playbook to imprison our loved ones, to silence them. And that's why I joined the World Liberty Congress, which is a movement of activists, human rights activists, democracy defenders in exile and in their own country, who decided to work together to fight against dictatorship, authoritarianism. And together we've built many tools that can help other people in a similar situation as us, including the Political Prisoner Handbook, which is a handbook that is, we wish that no one ever has to pick up. But if you pick up, you'll know what to do if your loved one is imprisoned. And so that's kind of how I find myself now here, and continue to talk about what's happening in Rwanda, but also to support other human rights activists around the world who are living, sadly, the same experience that I lived.
Thank you, thank you. I want to give, yes, please. I want to give all of you notice that we're going to save some time for questions. So if you want to start thinking about this opportunity to ask these two amazing women a question, we'll get there in a moment. But I want to now turn kind of more to the future. I mean, you both have exhibited such incredible resilience in the face of just enormous obstacles, and those challenges persist today, and in some cases have recurred in the case of the Taliban. So let's talk a little bit about the current situation in your countries and in your regions, how you're responding, and what lessons we can all learn from you and your experiences. Roya, it's been, 3 years now since the Taliban surged back into power in your country. And the stories that we heard, especially in those early days, were just grim beyond belief. What can you tell us about what's happening now? And how should we be thinking about the future there?
Sure. I mean, I have to say before that about the golden era of Afghanistan. And for centuries, Afghanistan always had the conflict and civil war. And the only era that we had the test of the freedom and test of the democracy and test of, having dignity and human rights and economic growth, it was during the 20 years that the US and NATO were in Afghanistan, provide a lot of opportunities. From the time that, that the Taliban first time left, only a few thousands could go to the schools, only boys. To the time that before the Taliban took over, we had more than 10 million girls and boys that they go to the schools. We had, more than 30% of the parliament. We had women that they're making decisions, and we had female in this, as ministers. We had a lot of women as a businesswomen. We had a lot of the progress that is happening during that time. And unfortunately, we did neglect it, and we failed to protect the democracy. We're choosing wrong leaders that they were corrupted, and they were selfish, and they're only thinking about themselves. So they couldn't protect the democracy that it was kind of gifted to us. And we didn't protect it. That's why right now the Taliban took over. And since the Taliban took over the country, they systematically and institutionally trying to, separation and bring excluding and bring oppressions for the girls and women just solely because of their genders. Since they created the laws, which is a state law against of the women, and more than 200 were the rules that they created to limit the social activity and public lives of the women. And more than right now, because of that result, girls cannot go to the schools beyond of 6th grades. Girls cannot go to universities, and when we know that the education is the fundamental human rights. And then the other hand, more than 57% of these young women are getting married under the age of 19, which the maximum is 19, and started from 15 and 16. And in many of the villages and rural areas, because of the increasing the poverty, unfortunately some families had to selling their children. Poverty has increased, and on the other hand, the UN reported that 2/3 of the populations, especially young women, they suffer from depressions, from anxiety, and there are also reports of that suicidal attempt of the women. Women cannot go to many of the jobs, and they cannot go to the working for the UN, or they can work for any international NGOs, and many of the field is taken away from them, and they cannot go to the beauty salons. And presently also the Taliban leaders banned the education for midwives. So the question is that who's gonna born the babies? And we are in the countries that the highest rates of the mortality rates for mothers who losing their lives or losing the child lives. So we are in that such a situation, which Afghanistan again is the only country in the world that the state make this law to making sure that the women don't have any basic rights. And then, in other hands, obviously we call it a gender apartheid. This regime is a gender apartheid because it's not only that we say the cultural norms or because of the religion preference, it's the state that put the police in charge to create the violence. And if the women do any complaining about the situation, they get arrested, they get tortured, and they get raped. So we are at that situation. As she mentioned, we are working at the World Liberty Congress, and Masih Ali-Nejad, which is president of the World Liberty Congress, she started a few years ago a gender apartheid campaign, a United Against Gender Apartheid campaign, which we joined as well as an Afghan to them, and we are trying to making sure that the Taliban will be accountable for the crimes they do. Our campaign has two components. One is the media, which we're telling the stories. We're trying to do the workshops, doing the small conferences to talk about what situation, not only in Afghanistan, but also what's happening with the women in Iran. But on the other hand, also we're trying that Afghan women using different, and especially those who are in diaspora, they're trying to using different platforms to talking with ICG and ICC to bring the Taliban to be accountable with the situation that they're. But meanwhile, what I see that the future is we are not going to lose the hope, because 60%, more than 63% of the population of Afghanistan are the young generation under 25.
60%?
More than 62 or 3% of the population, which many of them grew up during the democracy, during the era that they had access to information and they had access to freedom of speech. And we have seen that the last 3-4 years that Afghans are trying to protest it using the social medias, using the digital tools to continue, especially young women, they continue their education online in secret schools, underground, education. They went to protest it. Unfortunately, the Taliban tortured and tried to silence them, but they didn't stop. They're using the social media and digital tools for a way that to persistent and as well to be resilient and protested with what's happening in their country. And the women outside of Afghanistan, they're trying to telling their stories, making sure that the world knows about a situation in Afghanistan. And I think that's why I see hope. Hope for us is not just a feeling, it's an action. Even a young girl that have access to education, online training, or underground education center, if the women get together and community and they started their own businesses, whether it's online or working from home, I think that all of them is kind of that, is a way of the energy, is a silent, is a quiet, but is a determined energy that will shape the futures. I don't think that the situation in Afghanistan will remain forever like that, because I'm still hopeful for the younger generation that they are living in Afghanistan, and also in the Middle East.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anaïse, well, for those of you who were here last year, I think it was last year, you might remember the inspiring words from Dr. Dennis Mukwege, who really powerfully underscored that the impact of war falls predominantly on women. And in the DRC is where the kind of the central focus of that is in Africa right now. And I think it was a week ago today that Secretary Rubio had leaders from the DRC and from Rwanda in Washington to talk about some framework agreement that at least could, perhaps some say could set the foundations for peace. What do you think about that, Anaïse, and what should we be thinking about as Americans?
Well, that's a good question, but I'll take a step back before. I think one thing I forgot to mention about our campaign is that it was very challenging to remind people what Rwanda is like today. Because Rwanda has done such a great campaign, a PR campaign of what it looks like. You have Visit Rwanda on the major sports club around the world, like PSG in Paris or in the UK, now in Spain and Germany. You have NBA tournaments happening in Rwanda. Rwanda has become a beacon of hope in terms of the development world, yet Rwanda stays one of the poorest countries in the world. And they have managed to get money, the regime has managed to get money by going and looting in eastern DRC. The DRC is a country that has one of the largest pool of minerals that you can think of. Many of us are in need of it today. And Kagame has followed people in the DRC through transnational repression, killing them Congolese, but also Rwandans who were there. And when you think of Dr. Mukwege and his work, it's so sad to say, but there isn't a Dr. Mukwege as we know it today without the role of Rwanda in Eastern Congo as is today. And over the last 30 years, over 10 million people have died in the region because of rebel groups often backed by the Rwandan government. And yet, the Rwandan government always remains a partner of the United States, a partner of the European Union and other major countries around the world, often through peacekeeping and through military support. When they're doing these atrocities in the Congo, And so this peace deal that is happening today and our conversation ongoing, I have a lot of feelings about it, and not good feelings, because it's not going to the root cause of the issue. The root cause of the issue is the leadership that Kagame has mounted over the last 30 years, is the fact that there is no peace in the region, and it's the fact that he has been causing this and people ignoring it, and he has been enabled to do this for the last 30 years. And so I would hope the administration, instead of just doing a mineral deal that will help Congo, but also tries to change this and try to support the region and have real political change, real democracy, and where human rights are at the forefront of the discussions, not just economic profits that will go for the United States. And in these discussions too, which is crazier, the Rwandan government is going to participate in these mineral deals. They will also have a say. They will also be part of the probably downstream, and I think that was reported recently. And how can they have a say in these mineral deals when they have been the oppressor for the last 30 years? We need to question these. We need to question it because it does not set an example to the rest of the world. If you're a dictator who's winning by 99.15%, who invades a country, you can still get really good deals with one of the most powerful countries in the world. And that is very, very concerning. Senator McCain often said that we should stand up for our values and have integrity, and not at the cost of human rights. And I think that many people have forgotten that, and I hope that people remember these values of Senator McCain. One other really concerning thing through this deal is that Rwanda could also start taking in immigrants from the United States. Many of you may have heard of the refugee in the United Kingdom that thankfully did not pass through, but it is quite concerning that one of the poorest countries in the world, with no strong legal system, with a dictatorship, with no free media, is able to take in immigrants who are often fleeing these same conditions, and now they're arriving in the United States. And so these conversations, sadly, are in the name of peace, but the long-term consequences may be even worse than what we have today. And so I would call everybody in this room, but also anybody in the administration, to really re-question this deal and see a way that can actually bring sustainable peace and not just short-term gains.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm gonna thank you. All right, we have microphones that, so please, if you have a question, raise your hand, wait for the mic so that the folks online can hear you, and just identify yourselves, please. Yes, back here.
So start identifying myself first, or?
Yes, just tell us who you are.
Okay, yeah. My name is Andrew, and I'm a student at ASU. So my main question is for both of you guys. Both of you, of course, mention growing up and living through a period of maybe relative peace, but then quickly devolving back into autocracy again. So my question is, what are some big telltale signs that you saw, and maybe signs that people were ignorant to in the time being, but in retrospect, they are now glaring signs? And do we see those signs in, say, the US today or Europe today? And should we be paying attention closer to these signs?
Great question.
Yes, well, I think that there are things that we did neglected during our times. Corruption was existed with our governments. The leaders that we choose, they were corrupted, and they didn't pay attention on what people wanted. And this all was also making that people and the governments get the space between them get widened. People start not trusting them. And another issue was also propaganda and news. And the opposition groups continue to put a lot of the news that wasn't true, which those news affected the people, affected the minds of the people. During that time, I remember when the deal with the US happened, our soldier didn't want to fight because there was rumors out that US wants that the Taliban come into power, which wasn't much true to it. But these rumors come out. This type of the information is coming out, which it's making that people believe on, and they get silent. And they didn't taking an action because everybody says, okay, it's gonna happen, and this is what the US want and what's the government's, and they didn't try to fighting back. And I think that it's our, like, as an Afghan citizen, we have to take responsibility. It was our own fault. We cannot wait for other peoples, other countries to save us. It was our country, and we didn't pay attention on that, and we didn't fight enough for democracy. So I think that was our neglect, and not paying attention to the signs was the reason. And sometimes we feeling that, okay, I mean, someone else gonna save us. And we're waiting for another person to take that leaderships. And we don't understand that it's not coming, someone else come to save you. It's require every citizens to be together and united. And when you see something that's going wrong, you have to talk about that. If the time that you miss to talk about that issue is a time that you're gonna miss the opportunity, and you probably fail. Because democracy, I think that for us, as an Afghan, we get experience, our neglect is taken a seconds that things changed. Mm-hmm. And now for us, for years, we have to fight back to get, again, back into the time that we had a democracy. I don't know about the future, but I think that it will take a generation and fight and persistence. So it's important that to pay attention on the sign. And take it serious, because it's started. What Taliban did first time, they start to go with universities. They take changing all the universities' leadership with the mullahs. It's interesting what mullah can do. They're changing the curriculum in the schools. So right now, when the kids study science and maths, they're gonna read about Sharia law and how to become a good mujahid. And the question is that how many more mujahid we need and how many more fights we need when they are already in charge. So they go to education, and they're attacking our education system. They're attacking the media at the moment. They use media actually as a tool to write not just propaganda themselves. And you cannot talk because they're using the social media as a surveillance to see that what you are talking. And then if you talk against of your policies, you will be arrested. They will create a fear. So this is what's happening with the Taliban. Right now, they have much, at the beginning, they didn't start like that. But now, after a while, they started to get the power, rule the country, and they started to doing this stuff. And authoritarian regime always are doing that. And I hope that we don't see that in the United States, because I do have hope for, for the law here, and also I hopeful in American institutions and also the people.
Mm-hmm. Anaïse, do you have something to add?
We've in Rwanda, we went from, we've only had, I think, 4 presidents since independence, since 1961. And the first part of, from independence in 1994, the rules that we had were not any different from what we see today. Except that they had maybe less money or less media reach the technology. So for us, the dancers changed, but the music remained the same. So we never had the chance to actually be in a free country. But here in the United States, people do know what a free country is like. And so I think that I would advise you to see what happens in other countries like mine, like Rwanda, and make sure you protect your liberties here, so that's what happens in my country does not happen in this country. Our country was the extreme representation of hate, of disenfranchisement, and that resulted in a genocide. I don't think this will ever happen here because people believe in the rule of law, and I think there's more limitation, breaks, but really bad things can happen when you don't stand up early. And so the United States is very lucky that sadly, other countries around the world have failed in many ways. And so learn from other countries and remember that you have liberties here and use those liberties to protect your own countries.
Great. Thank you for that, and for both of you for all the work that you have done and continue to do. I think if any of us are looking for bright spots or something to feel hopeful about, you have just heard from two of them right now. So please join me in thanking again Roya.